So I thought it'd be easier just to play some of this video and interrupt it as it flows to make a couple of points and observations about just kind of the tone and tenor of the trial that's being conducted here, if you want to call it a trial. We'll start right here.
Then, at some points, the trial just becomes downright bizarre. Or like one where the judge tells Jones to spit out his gum, to which he replies it's not gum, that he had a tooth pulled and is massaging the spot, and then this happened.
So you're chewing.
I just want to point out, we want to take a look at the level of hostility that the judge directs towards Alex Jones, which you could chalk up as frustration, but having some background knowledge of what's been going on in the court, she is really, really hostile towards this defendant, which, you want to question that, say, hey, I'm entitled as a constitutional right to an impartial jury, impartial trial. And these proceedings seem to be, it seems like the judge is heavily biased against me. Those are important legal things to consider. So it's worth noting, and it shows itself again and again, the sort of bias that this judge has towards Alex Jones.
On your gauze.
Would you like me to show you?
No, I just want you to answer my question.
No, I was massaging the hole in my mouth with my tongue. I'm sure right here.
I don't want to see the inside.
You can see that she expressed some incredulity. And so him knowing that she's absolutely wrong with that incredulity about him not chewing gum, she is the one that kind of framed this thing like she didn't really believe him, and then wanted to back off after Alex Jones does what Alex Jones does, which is he makes a theatrical piece out of everything. She realized very quickly she made a big mistake in questioning that.
Out of your mouth.
Oh, no, there's no gum.
So the judge chastises him several more times, telling him that he's violated his oath by lying over and over again during the trial and saying,
Were you?
This is an important point to bring up. She's going to discuss the rules that she set forth, which a lot of judges do. There's a lot of reasons why you set forth rules and limitations, motions and limiting. And this will come up again a little bit later, but just listen to the motions and limiting that she had originally issued, which just boggled the mind as to how you could say a defendant can't evoke the kinds of things that she's restricting him from doing.
You instructed that there were some things you could not testify about.
Yes.
And do you remember what they were?
Yes.
And what were they?
The document you put out saying don't talk about free speech, don't say I'm innocent.
So that's just that. Those are the two things. Like he's not allowed to say that he's innocent, which puts a defendant in a pretty hard spot. And I understand there's a previous ruling. We see in the press that it's being described as he's been found guilty of defamation. He wasn't found guilty of defamation. It was a directed verdict. A judge just unilaterally said he's guilty without actually allowing him to ever present a case. So there's a difference between being found guilty of something and a judge just by fiat declaring you're guilty. But that is true. This judge said that he can't evoke the First Amendment. He can't, discuss the fact that he's not guilty. So much for an impartial trial. It's that kind of ties your hands, because the First Amendment is really his sole defense, or would have been his sole defense in the first trial had the judge not stopped the trial and just did a directed verdict. So let's listen.
And a bunch of other stuff, and then that got withdrawn. I believe you withdrew it. I think it's called motion limiting.
Okay, so you don't remember?
No. I remember currently.
Stop. Remember day one where I said it's an unfair world and you don't get to interrupt the judge? Do you remember that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. But the judge gets to interrupt you.
Okay.
Remember that? Yeah. Okay, so you don't really remember what you were not supposed to testify about. That's what I'm hearing, because you said, yes, I remember. No, I don't remember.
Well, I'm trying to remember.
Okay, I don't want you to try and remember.
No,
I don't want you to try and remember. You either knew or you don't.
Why?
Again, it's worth noting just the level of hostility that this judge has towards this defendant in this court of supposed law. It really does smack of kangaroo court when we see this kind of condescension and power tripping coming off the bench. And sadly, it's really not uncommon. It's very common.
Watching part of Heslin's testimony when I was coming here and him talking about the bankruptcy, so I thought that was totally fine. I mean, he gets to. Why do I not get to do what he gets to do?
Mr. Jones,
Yeah.
stop making. Just stop.
All right. So this is a really important point that Alex Jones just made. Heslin brought up the bankruptcy. So in motions of limiting, where you say the defense is not allowed to bring this thing up, if the prosecution brings that thing up, that enters that into evidence, and now it's open to discovery. It's open to more questions. If you remember the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, there were a lot of motions of limiting on both sides that the judge set forth that they weren't supposed to talk about, and each of the opposing counsels were constantly waiting for one of them to accidentally bring something up and step into it, because once that's opened up, once okay, in this case, the motion of limiting was against Alex Jones, and he was not allowed to talk about his bankruptcies. But once the prosecution brings that up, that opens that line of questioning up to the defense, because it's not fair. And these are basic the rules, trial rules, that it's not fair that you would have one counsel be able to bring up certain facts and evidence and circumstances and all these sorts of things, and not allow the other counsel, the opposing counsel, to pursue that same line of evidence, facts, and circumstances. So his complaint there was legitimate, and her reply to him was stop, basically saying stop trying to exercise your rights as a U.S. citizen.